My name is Silas, and my friends and colleagues know two very important things about me. I'm a conductor, and I love coffee, especially espresso. No matter where I travel in the world, the first thing I try to do is find the best coffee shop and learn about the local coffee drinking habits. If I can, I try to meet up with old friends or make new ones in a coffee shop, of course, so we can talk about life, art, music, or whatever's on our minds. I found that there's no better way to get to know a conductor a little better than by having coffee with the maestro. Today I'm having coffee with Geneviève Leclaire. She's the assistant professor of composition and conducting at Berklee College of Music in Boston, and she's also a frequent guest conductor at Symphony New Brunswick, Northern Ballet, and National Ballet of Canada. Geneviève is a lot of fun to talk to, and so I'm going to make myself an espresso and give her a call right now. Je sais bonjour, ça va?
Ça va très bien, et vous?
Tu sais que je voudrais toujours pratiquer parler français, mais peut-être, maybe right now isn't the right time.
Just for the sake of everybody else
Yeah,
listening.
for the sake of people who don't speak French and for the people who speak French. But you're very kind for letting me practice with you sometimes. I have 2 or 3 conductor friends who let me speak French. You're very polite.
Well, it's always a pleasure speaking your own language. I'm never going to discourage anybody who wants to practice.
Geneviève, do you have a coffee or some morning beverage? I've got my espresso here.
I've got a tea.
A tea, okay. But anything special?
Blueberry white. It's a very nice little blend. There used to be a tea shop across from the Coop at Harvard. It's not there anymore, but they have this very blueberry blend. Because at the risk of angering all of your fans on the show, I don't like coffee.
Well, one person had the gall to come on the show with a cup of water. It was
So here we go. The next best thing.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah.
And what are you having?
I didn't maybe I told you this when I most recently saw you in Montreal when we were up there for a conference, and I may have told you the story when I was there, but I never drank coffee when I was younger, even as a young adult, until I went to France one summer. I was at a workshop, and another conductor took me to a shop and said, "Hey, let's get some coffee." I said, "Oh, I don't drink coffee." He goes, "Well, just try it." And I had an espresso. And since that day, I think I've had an espresso every single day for 20 years.
Really?
Yeah.
You got hooked.
But I had to go someplace where they have really good coffee. Yeah, that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't in France that summer, I don't think.
Here you go.
It might have happened at another time. And my other question for you is, where in the world are you? But I think you said you're in Boston right now.
I'm in Boston right now, yes.
How are things in Boston?
Good. I mean, it's nothing has really started reopening yet, so we're still in sort of in home mode as far as teaching and performance goes, and sort of we're waiting, but things are good.
So there at the Berklee School of Music, everything is still online.
Everything is still online. Yeah, we had the word that it's online until the end of the fall semester. So we'll see about the spring, but for now we're teaching from home.
So I'm curious, because you teach conducting, and how does one teach conducting online? I did it in the spring, second half of the spring semester, and it was not easy. But what are you doing? Yeah. Well, you're not the only conductor who's teaching conducting this semester, and I'm sure a lot of people would like to hear, like, how do you do that? What are you doing?
Well, it's not necessarily the ideal setting for teaching conducting, so you have to be a little bit creative. But we work with some recording. I also like to have my students conduct in silence, just imagining the music in their head to really see what's coming out of it. Can they be very precise about what they're imagining and the sound that they have in their head, and it's amazing the amount of things you see there, whether the image is clear or not.
Oh,
whether it's really coming across, and you can see the moments, yes, okay, I see what they want to do, and then suddenly you can see the moment where whoops, the idea is not as clear, or the sound is not as clear. So there's quite a bit that can be done.
Okay. Do you have students sing as they conduct sometimes?
Yes, I also have them sing as they conduct. So it's sort of combination of all of these things that sort of circumvent the problem of synchronization.
Mm-hmm.
With the online platform, you sort of playing for each other is out at this moment, but singing or even doing it in silence, there's actually quite a lot that you find you can be done. Most of my students are in the beginning stages of their conducting development, so there's actually quite a lot you can see. But even later on, just about the communication, just about whether you're actually expressing the music in what you're doing, whether what you're doing is clear enough that one can hear the music that goes with it. Mm-hmm. Right. So, yeah. What about you?
Well, I taught beginning conducting in the spring semester, and unfortunately, the first few weeks of the semester we were in person, and then the second half of the semester was online. I would have preferred it the other way, but I didn't have a choice. But so in the beginning of the semester, there was a lot of book work. We were talking about transpositions and foreign musical terms, and we were reading articles about conducting and excerpts from textbooks, and I had them watching videos and writing their observations. And then in the middle of the semester, I would have gone to all conducting in class and actually practicing, but that's when we went online. So I did more of that reading and analyzing. And so, for example, I chose 5 videos of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony on YouTube, and I said, watch the first 2 minutes of these 5 videos and then compare and contrast. I chose one that was terrible and one that was, something magical like Karajan or something. And then they watched them, and the students wrote to me a little paper with their observations, and it was really good work. It was really insightful. It's not as good as just practicing conducting. So it would have been better if we were in class conducting each other, but that wasn't possible. I felt like in the spring semester, we did good training for beginning conductors, but I'm very nervous about next spring when I teach advanced conducting, because in advanced conducting, the students should just conduct and get feedback from the ensemble, and then feedback from me as well. And so I'm hoping that in January, we're back to school normal.
See, if not, we'll get even more creative.
I don't know how one learns conducting without putting their hands on the music. I mean, you can practice. You certainly, and for a person like you who's had a career already, and you've got many hours of time in front of an orchestra, you can be home alone and study scores and practice in advance. But if you're a beginner and you don't even know how it feels to conduct.
Absolutely. I mean, I keep saying to my students, that you really learn what it is the day that you're in front of the orchestra on a regular basis, and that's really where you hone your skills in front of the instruments. But what
you know that I organize some conducting workshops on the side. And part of the reason I do that is because I firmly believe that conductors learn more by doing than by reading or watching. Reading and watching is really important also. But I learned more when I was, say, getting my master's degree. I learned more about conducting in 2 weeks at a workshop than I learned in 2 years at the university. And so I do as many workshops. I did when I was younger, as many workshops as I could, 2 or 3 or 4 a year. And then even since then, I've continued organizing workshops just so I can go and watch students learning. I still learn every time I see a student on the podium.
Of course.
And so you just have to get in front of an ensemble and do it.
You do.
But a lot.
Because you do learn a lot watching it, but you have to put it in practice at some point to really sort of that clicking moment. For me, it was, I don't know if you know that, but I started out as apprentice conductor with a festival with the National Academy Orchestra in Canada, in Hamilton, Canada, which is part of a summer festival. It's a little bit like the Canadian equivalent of New World, but it's summer. And it's a mentoring orchestra with principals coming from all over the country in the summer, and so the pace is quite quick. It's 2-3 concerts a week for the whole summer. And that's really where, again, it's just like you're saying, that's really where I sort of, okay, now you have, it's the pace of the professional world of having to say, okay, repertoire, 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 repertoire. And that's really where it clicked. Okay, now it's coming all into place, what you've been learning in your conducting program. So yes, there's no replacement for being
Yeah,
very
when I was a master's student, I lived in Germany for 1 year. I did a study abroad program, and so many of my friends have heard this story. I don't know if you've heard it, but I'll just tell it again for the people watching. But I was going to California State University, Long Beach, and they had an arrangement with a conservatory in the Black Forest, Southwest Germany. And that conservatory didn't really have a conducting program. But I said, well, I'm a conductor. I'd like to come study conducting. And they said, well, yeah, we'll find something for you to do. And I got there and they assigned me to conduct the flute choir and the trombone ensemble. And it wasn't, for me, it wasn't really what I was hoping for. But so as soon as I got there, I started looking for other opportunities. And I asked my advisor there at the Hochschule für Musik, can I just move to Berlin and watch rehearsals and study privately up there? And he goes, yeah, sure, why not? Write a paper, go up there, live in Berlin for a year, and then at the end write a big paper about it, and that will be your year abroad. So I didn't go to any classes or take any exams in this year. I just went to rehearsals all day, every day. And a typical day in Berlin would be like, Berlin Philharmonic rehearsal in the morning, Komische Oper in the afternoon, watching, one of the other orchestras perform in the evening, and the next day, like a different program altogether. The Rundfunk Orchestra in the morning, and then the Berlin Phil in the afternoon. Every day for basically 8 months or 9 months, I did that. Amazing. And
amazing.
I don't say I learned the most there because I wasn't conducting at all, and I wasn't getting any training, like feedback on my conducting, but I was watching all of the really famous conductors working at that time. It was a little less than 20 years ago, but they all came through Berlin that year. That was the year Abbado was the music director, but he had cancer. So they had a guest conductor every week.
Yeah.
So it was like a different conductor every week. It was amazing. But that's how I learned, by watching conductors. And then as soon as that was done, I started taking every workshop I could and imitating those conductors, which never works, but
hopefully our students can get back to that soon.
I hope so. Yeah, surely you're doing something besides teaching, though. You must have a little extra time now because you're home so much.
Yeah, well, I'm still working. I have some projects that still look like they're going to be happening at the moment. So I'm working on a chamber opera by Laura Kaminsky that we're supposed to give the Quebec premiere in Montreal. The Quebec premiere of the opera in the fall with the Orchestra Classique de Montréal, and it looks like it's still happening at the moment. So I'm working on that quite intensely. It's a string quartet, 2 singers, so it's quite the small ensemble on stage, and they've devised a way to have about 100 people in the hall distance, and then an online streaming of the performance.
Oh, great!
So yeah.
The big question then is, will you be allowed to go to Canada?
Well, as a citizen, yes.
Oh, I see. If you have a Canadian passport, you can't get coronavirus.
No, it's not that so much, but they have to, constitutionally, they have to let you in. You have to quarantine, however, so I'm going to have to go early to be able to do the full period of quarantine before starting rehearsals.
Will you drive or fly?
Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in a conundrum because I have to travel a little bit soon as well, and I just don't want to fly, and it's a long drive. I don't know how far it is from Boston to Montreal. Did you say Quebec or Montreal? Where are you going?
It's Montreal, so it's about 5.5 hours. It's
5.5 hours, yeah. So that's not so bad. You can do that in a day pretty easily.
Yeah.
I have to drive 12 hours one way for a weekend, and then 12 hours back.
Yeah, that's a longer one.
Yeah, it makes me want to fly, but I don't want to fly. I'm not scared to fly, but I'm kind of scared to fly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can understand that. Well, that's going to be a nice one to ponder on.
Yeah. Well, if it was a direct flight, it would be different, but I have to do a layover, and every time you add a thing, 2 airports instead of 1 airport. It's 3 airports actually, including the arrival. So it's just it's riskier and riskier. but it looks like I'll be doing a lot of driving this fall, so that's okay.
Here we go. Probably a few of us. So yeah, that's the plan right now. I'm working on that repertoire. I have a concert after that that's in January with a community orchestra that we're supposed to start rehearsing in December.
Okay.
So far, we're still on for January. So actually, I gave them two programs: one full orchestra, one and reduced orchestra. So you know what it is. You prepare the various options. It just in case either one ends up happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a little bit what's happening at the moment on the
Yeah.
on the outside. Yeah,
Exciting that you still have concerts. I'm working with my university orchestra now. Oh, I didn't tell you that you asked earlier and I talked about something else, but I had two rehearsals with my orchestra at Washburn University last week.
amazing.
It was so nice to make music again. It was weird
I
because
was gonna say,
because
are you
the,
distancing or how are
yeah,
you
we're
doing it?
doing 6 feet between everyone,
Okay.
and everyone's wearing a mask, even the wind and brass players, and most of them don't mind so much. The oboe doesn't like it so much because it's hard to get the reed in and out of the mask without damaging it.
Yeah.
So we're still trying to think about what we're going to do for her. But it's only 24 musicians, so it's basically like the string section is 3 3 2 2 1, very small string section, and then 1 2 apart in the woodwinds. So finding repertoire is difficult. Uh,
Yeah.
I have to. I'm writing arrangements. I'm reducing things for them, and we're doing the Schoenberg arrangement of Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun and things like that.
Yeah.
We have to find music that we can do with 24 musicians.
Of
But it
course.
was so nice to do music again.
It's the right now. It's the big period for beginning 20th century French music, basically.
Yeah,
If you're
so
looking for orchestras of that size, right?
yeah,
We're all going to be doing Belle Époque.
yeah, and thank goodness for those composers, those early 20th century composers who did a lot of small orchestra stuff. Stravinsky wrote pieces for chamber orchestra, and Copland wrote, obviously there's Appalachian Spring and some other pieces like that. And then Schoenberg and his class, they wrote all these
Those reductions,
reductions.
yes.
And I've studied those when I was a student, so I'm actually modeling them when I am writing my own reductions right now. So I'm producing 2 or 3 scores at the moment. It's a lot of work. And I know that in a couple of weeks, the university might shut down when the numbers go up, when the case numbers go up. So I'm doing all this work maybe for nothing. But everybody's very optimistic. Nobody likes wearing the masks, but everybody's doing it gladly. I think they're just happy to be back with their
Yeah.
friends and colleagues.
No work is ever really for nothing because
Yeah,
it ends up at some point. It's useful at some point, even
yeah.
if it's not immediately. Who knows?
Hey,
Maybe 10
I
years from
wanted
now,
to ask you about the ballet world,
yes.
because when I think of you, and I think of I think of your name, I think of ballet conducting, and I know that's not all you do. You conduct everything and anything, but you do quite a lot of work in ballet, and that's a thing I have a little experience in, and I love it. I think a lot of conductors love it, but don't really know exactly what it is. Can you tell me how it's different from conducting a symphony orchestra?
Well, it's different in a similar way that of doing opera, right? Because when you do opera, you got to be familiar with singers and singing techniques and coaching and all of that. So it's a little bit, not that you're going to be coaching the dancers, they've got people for that, but it's a little bit similar in that way because in order to really understand what's going on, you have to understand movement, you have to understand dance, you have to be able to speak that language also. So all the terms for the movements and all of that, because when ballet masters or repetitors or choreographers say, okay, let's restart from, they're going to speak ballet, not music. They're not going to tell you, let's restart from rehearsal 24. So you have to be able to do the translation between the two. So you have to be able to understand, okay, what does it mean? Let's restart from the manège. And then where is that in the score? And right, so you have to be able to speak ballet enough to be able to do the translation between the two.
And where did you learn to speak that ballet language?
Well, I danced as a kid. I started training in ballet at the tender age of 2.
Okay.
Up to
Yeah.
17, up to going to college, basically, at which point I really focused only on music. But I trained music and ballet side by side. I didn't have the chops to be a professional dancer. I loved it, and I continued dancing all these years, and I was immersed in the art form. Also, I went, I was at the National Art Center when Karen Kane of the National Ballet of Canada did her final farewell tour
Mm.
before she retired. So I was immersed in that environment, in the repertoire, and so when I started conducting for ballet, I was already familiar with the language of the art form. Some conductors take classes. Literally, they're going to go take ballet class to learn more about it, because it's the vocabulary, but it's also understanding movement. That affects tempo quite a bit. Being able to read, how fast the pirouette, how long is it going to take to do that jump land, right? Because you can't suspend the dancer in the air and say, "We'll take just a little bit more time." Gravity will gravity will determine what's possible to do, right? So understanding the dynamic of the movement, being able to read what you're seeing, and knowing, did they actually finish that movement? Was it just a tad too fast and they had to sort of clip the end of it? Was it a tad too slow? Are they muscling it to try to sustain it longer when it's not comfortable for them? Being able to read that on people, with singers, it's still music. We use our ears to be able to determine these things. But with a dancer, you have to use your eyes solely. So it's it's a little bit of all of that. So it's getting familiar with that other art form, so that you can read it as much as you can read music, basically.
Yeah, I have very little experience with ballet, but like a lot of conductors, I've done a bunch of Nutcrackers and a couple of other ballets. And I noticed when I was working with dancers that they count differently. They'll say, oh, on beat 7, this, you have to slow down a little bit. And I'm looking at, we're a waltz. It's
Yes.
in 3, but it's actually in 1. And I go, beat 7, what the heck is this guy talking about? But I figured out that they talk about big phrases, and sometimes a beat is 1 bar, which makes sense because we all mark our scores that way, like every 4 or 8 bars or 6 bars or whatever.
Well, it's because they're not marking it from reading on the page. They're marking it from analyzing it orally, right? So they'll be marking it from how they're sort of, and sometimes that's what we call dancer counts. Sometimes, depending on, they might be counting the whole bar by 1 in a waltz, right? So it's sort of reading it from a music appreciation, like reading your score from music appreciation stance.
Yeah.
You can mark all of that. Sometimes a good place to start when you're doing a ballet is checking out your rehearsal pianist's score, because they usually have all the marks that they've ever heard in rehearsals. So you're going to have a large variety of marks that you can put in your own score to be able to help figure out where you are before it's all in there. But there's no substitute. It's like with conducting, there's no substitute to spending quite a bit of time in the rehearsal studio and watching them work on it.
So when you're conducting a ballet, at what point do you show up in the studio without your baton and without the orchestra, just to watch the dancers work?
Well, you have to give them time to learn it a little bit, right? You don't necessarily want to be there when they're learning all the steps one by one, or we'll start showing up in the studio when they're running things, when they start putting entire movements together or entire acts together, and just watch, see where they're at, what they're at. But yes, you get a feeling for where they're at, and the pianist knows exactly where they're at, but you have to keep in mind that those tempos are going to keep evolving. Because it's like anything. It's like us when we learn a piece. You start slower, and then you speed up, you speed up, you speed up, you speed up. So you have to keep in mind that the tempos are going to keep evolving probably through the rest of the rehearsal and through the performances as well. 45 performances into a ballet, you're in a different place in terms of comfort than you were on performance number 1. So oftentimes the tempo will keep evolving all the way through the production.
And I know that a lot of ballet conductors are the rehearsal pianists, especially in smaller companies, they're the rehearsal pianists, and then they moved into the pit. And I would think that the rehearsal pianist has a huge advantage because they've been there since the beginning and they've seen the tempos evolve and they know the dancers' capabilities and who can do what and who likes which tempo.
Yeah, personally, I've never done that because I'm not a pianist. I play flute, but yes, of course. Then you get a good feeling for what everybody is doing. At the same time, you can reproduce that by just watching in rehearsals. When I'm conducting for ballet, I usually, yes, there's an idea of metronomically where you are in terms of tempo, but that's always going to put you slightly off.
Mhm.
Because it's not metronomical. It has to do with, it's physical, right? It has to do with, and it's going to be different one day to the other. Is the dancer in a great form today, or not as much, or did that jump go as high as it did the day before, right? It's always going to. So if you're counting it metronomically, you're always going to be a little bit. So there's a visual connection, and so not only am I, in order to hit the right tempo, imagining the movement that they have to do, there's usually a telltale movement somewhere in that gives you just the right tempo. But I'm also imagining it on the dancer who's dancing, because you often have multiple casts of
Oh,
dancers.
right.
So I'm oftentimes imagining it on that particular dancer. What does it look like on them to really get the tempo? So, and you can do that by just spending some time in the rehearsal watching them do it. You get a good read on what they're doing. You're sort of imprinting those movements in your mind. You're going to get a good feel for it if you're playing the piano, and you sort of get a tempo out of it physically. But you can do the same thing by just watching the rehearsal. Really.
Yeah, interesting. So it must be nerve-wracking then if you're a cover or an assistant to just step into a performance when you maybe haven't had the chance to do all that work.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you do it. You know, I've done it as an assistant many times. Just walk in cold and do Romeo and Juliet, right? Beginning to end.
Yeah.
uh, Oftentimes, you'll have had the chance, at least, to do some rehearsals in the studio with the piano if you didn't get rehearsals with the orchestra. But sometimes there are some pieces that don't rehearse to piano, that they, for a reason or another, rehearse to tape. And there's a choreographer I've worked with. He just prefers the dancers to rehearse to the tape so they can hear the orchestration.
Okay.
And so you can see why they're just being really aware of how the music is constructed and what you're going to be hearing. But that means that there are no rehearsals with piano in the studio. So if you're a number 2 conductor, even if you're a number 1 conductor and you're going to be doing, you're going to be doing opening night and you get the rehearsals, you still only get to rehearse it once at the dress rehearsal. Basically. So you're going to rehearse it with the orchestra, and then you'll get one dress rehearsal, try it with the dancers before you're on. But if you're the number 2 conductor and you're coming in later in the production, then that's it.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to do it live. So you have to construct all of this in your head and really get a feel physically for the tempos without ever trying it.
Yeah. At
So
least you have the tempos on tape, on CD or whatever. So you
well,
know
it
it's a good
depends
version.
because sometimes, and that particular choreographer gives quite a bit of freedom to his conductors, because he wants really the music to very musically literate, and he understands how performance can move. And but by giving a lot of freedom, also it means that you have multiple tapes that are different speeds and that are not necessarily sort of the ideal speed that you would want for something. So sometimes you have to reconstruct even the tempo structure of it as you're watching the rehearsals, and then you'll get to try it in the performance. So I find that every conductor should do ballet conducting at some point. It's really good for honing your skills as a conductor, because it means that you have to be crystal clear about what you're showing to the orchestra. You have to be able to turn the tempo without rehearsing it with, and just say, and this is what we're doing this time. If there's a longer wait, if there's a right, so it is really good for the conducting skills to say, can I actually be that clear without ever having to say a word, for the orchestra to understand what I'm doing, and to trust that also that, what you're showing, they can count on. So I think just for the sake of the training, everything out there should do ballet.
Well, teachers say the same thing about opera, that if you can get through an accompanied recitative, you can get through nearly anything.
Yeah, it's the same idea.
I'll ask you one more question before I let you go. What's your favorite ballet, or maybe your favorite ballet composer?
Oh, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
It's funny because every time anybody asks me that question, I usually answer whatever I'm working on at the moment, right? Because you have to get, what it is. It's this, it's not just ballet. It's the same for symphonic music or opera. You have to get so into the piece that you're in right now, to that every time I'm doing a new ballet, I'm like, this is the favorite one of them all, because you have to get so much into it to sort of communicate that enthusiasm to the audience and to the orchestra. And that, there's so much. There's the ballet composers that have composed ballet music out there, like Tchaikovsky, and all that music is brilliant. Stravinsky, but there's also nowadays quite a lot of symphonic music that's used to create ballets, and so then now you're opening sort of the range up to pretty much any music we have out there. So it's hard to pinpoint one favorite, but yeah.
We'll accept this answer. You love all the music.
Exactly.
Whatever you're working on.
Whatever I'm working on at the moment.
Yeah, this is actually a pretty common question that non-musicians ask conductors a lot. Who's your favorite composer? And it really doesn't matter who you say. You're wrong, because they're like, oh, well, I like it. But I was asked this question in an interview once, and I said, well, like you, I said, well, whatever I'm working on right now, that's the thing. And then the next conductor that did this interview said, oh, I hate when conductors say whatever I'm working on right now. That's so wishy-washy. They should just have it. So what are you going to do?
Well, it's just, I've never been the sort of, I guess for anything, I'm never really sort of the fan type of, I love everything that I tend to, even with, when somebody asks me, who's your favorite conductor? I love aspects of what some people do. I love their French music, or I love, their expressivity, or I tend to sort of look at specific things like that, rather than say wall to wall love everything that someone has done. So I guess I'm a little bit the same way with the music also. That's why also I get very into whatever I'm working on right now, because then you start digging into it and you find all sorts of fascinating things, and then you dig into the next piece and you find all sorts of fascinating things into that one too. So I guess that's a little bit how my mind works. So I never know how to answer that question, basically.
Well, the good news is you don't have to have a favorite. We can just not have a favorite. We can like lots of things.
Yeah.
What
about you? Who's your favorite?
I don't know. If I could tell you my favorites, but it's a long list.
It's long list, exactly.
That's pretty much everyone. Yeah. The list of composers I don't like is much shorter, and I could start there, but we get in an argument right away, so I don't want to even tell you.
We'll keep that for another conversation.
Yeah, one that's not being recorded. Well, Geneviève, thank you for your time. It's always lovely to spend time with you and chat with you.
Same here. Thank you for inviting me. This was great.
All right, have a nice day.
You too.